If you are ever at Willem's Wharf, you're going to notice that there is a sewer pipe that leads to Hubris Comics utility tunnels. And if you go inside, you will find a very confusing labyrinth of tunnels. These tunnels kind of span in each direction, and it is infested with feral ghouls. Combined with high amounts of radiation in the tunnels and just an overall feeling of claustrophobia, this place is, well, kind of hell. But it's not too difficult as far as enemies, and well, Dogmeat is just a one-man wrecking machine, just absolutely destroying the ghouls in this room. And this first room that we enter is important because we can find, well, one of the few unique items in the utility tunnels. Back here near this control panel, there's a desk. On top of the desk, we can find a copy of Dean's Electronics. For the rest of the utility tunnels, I'll just fast forward it because just a confusing array of tunnels. You want to make your way through. There was one feral ghoul reaver for me, which is just a big bullet sponge that can deal a moderate amount of damage, but not too difficult. Now, depending on which way you take in the tunnels, you can find two entrances to Hubris Comics, and the one I took just kind of takes us to the middle of the facility, which is fine for the sake of the video. We will just go through either way, it doesn't really matter. We come into this large room where the floor is clearly deteriorating, as about half of it has collapsed into the section below, and then there's a ton of desks and typewriters. Obviously, this is the room where they were writing the comics, writing out the stories, and stuff like that. Down below, there was a good amount of feral ghouls. Dogmeat jumped down there and destroyed them, and I just kind of was a coward and shot them from above. We get a pretty cool sight in this room of all of the typewriters and the sun coming through as the building slowly deteriorates. Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Capital Wasteland. A little bit of an unorthodox intro today, because the beginning of this video, or the entrance to the utility tunnels, always confused me as a kid, because as I said earlier in the video, the entrance to the utility tunnels is near Willem's Wharf. However, Hubris Comics is way down south near the Citadel, which is just kind of a big distance to travel, but inside the utility tunnels, it doesn't really feel that far, not even close to it, actually. So I just thought it was kind of weird as a kid, and I still find it to be kind of amusing. Now, Hubris Comics is a location, obviously, where they printed several famous comics and kind of cartoons that were popular in the pre-war era, perhaps most notable, Grognak the Barbarian, a comic book that we can still find to this day littered across the Capital Wasteland. Now, the alternative method to get here would be to go through the Falls Church metro system, and then you can pop right out next to Hubris Comics, but since we're already inside, we don't have to worry about that. But if you are curious as to the location, here it is on the Pip-Boy, just west of the Citadel, south of Falls Church, and east of the Nuka-Cola factory. Now, going back inside of the typing room downstairs, we can find a ton of books and bookshelves, but despite that, there's actually nothing of interest down here as far as loot. There's some bathrooms, a utility closet, but there's just nothing of interest. So we're going to head over to the southern side of the building where we can find beta testing, and inside of here we can find a terminal, and on this terminal we can find the Reign of Greylock beta, which is a mini text adventure game, somewhat similar to games such as the Zork series, Planetfall, and the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now, this little game is kind of fun to play, and there's actually a way to win the game, so you can win it. Unfortunately, we don't get a reward for winning the game. It just says, like, thank you for playing, which is, I guess, kind of actually, like, real life, which is, yeah, anyways. Wish we got a real reward in Fallout 3. But anyways, this game is kind of similar maybe to the Elder Scrolls or something, like a very, very primitive version of the Elder Scrolls. Now, in order to beat the game, the first thing you want to do is go north. Then you want to observe the mountainside, and then you will spot a kind of sparkling glint between the rocks. Then you want to investigate the glistening object, and then you will pick up a rough gemstone. From here, you want to go back to the main area. You want to go to the west, to the swamp, and you want to look around the swamp. Here you will find a wizard. We want to then talk to the wizard, and the wizard will then split the gemstone in half. And then from here, we want to go back to the main area, and we want to go to the south, and we want to look around the town. Then we want to speak with the blacksmith in order to upgrade our sword, and then we want to talk with the priest. After we talk with the priest, we will learn of a chapel to the east. So we want to go back to the main area and then go back to the east. And then we want to look around the chapel. At the chapel, we will find a zombie. So using our newly acquired sword, we want to use that against the zombie in order to kill the zombie. Then we want to examine the zombie's grave, and then we will take the zombie's head. We want to go back to the main area, go south again, back to the town, bring the zombie's head to the priest, and then go back to the chapel because the priest has exchanged the zombie head for the key to the chapel. So go back to the chapel, open up the chapel by looking around the chapel, and then we want to examine the chapel. Wow, lots of chapels, huh? Anyways, we will fill our flask with holy water, and then after that we want to go to the north, all the way to the mountain where Greylock is, this evil wizard that we want to kill. Then we want to use our magical sword on Greylock, and Greylock will die, thus completing our adventure. And if you read the text, his death is actually pretty freaking cool. But then we get the end, and thanks for playing. Now, this was just a beta, but obviously a very early edition of a video game in the Fallout universe. After that, we can click victory, game over, and it'll kick us out of the terminal. If we try to re-enter the terminal, we can just restart the game all over again. Now, outside beta testing, we can find this snack machine that has a stim pack in it, which is not half bad. Then, as we make our way towards the entrance, there is a rigged crib just right there. I completely missed it. I thought the baby crying was coming from the crib in front of me, and I backed right up into the rigged crib. Anyways, thankfully, that didn't hurt me at all, somehow, and I made my way to the entrance of Hubris Comics. We can see Hubris Comics written on the wall, and we can head outside. Be careful, because depending on your karma, you'll be attacked by Talon Company mercs or regulators. And here, there are also a fucking ton of super mutants, and a crazy freaking firefight broke out. First, I shot Dogme, and Dogme got, like, pissed off at me, but then he turned around and actually started fighting the right people, and then a huge gang of super mutants just showed up, and I kind of actually feel bad for this Talon Company merc. He got his day absolutely wrecked by, like, a half dozen super mutants. So after this, I pulled out my missile launcher in order to thin out the herd of super mutants, just launching tons of missiles into their group, and that did a good job at thinning them down and removing a lot of their health. And then I used a laser rifle to finish them off from there. After that, we can do some looting and get some pretty awesome loot, like 5.56mm rounds. Also a ton of Chinese assault rifles. If you're going to use that, you can fix some up and sell them later in the game. As far as loot in this Pulaski Preservation Shelter, if you open it up, we can find a copy of Dean's Electronics on the ground. Then there's this huge statue of a man jumping through or walking through a hoop. And down below, we can see the entirety of the Mason District. Now, I don't know what this little square is called, but for the sake of the video, I'm just going to call it Mason Square. Now, in the middle of Mason Square, there's a wasteland captive, which we can save. This is where the super mutants normally hang out, but because there were Talon Company mercs at Hubris Comics, they made their way up there for a pretty freaking insane and awesome and hilarious firefight. If we go to the southwest of Mason Square, we can find a little, like, sniper post up here. There's a skeleton. We can find a copy of Guns and Bullets, a stim pack, and then some 5.56 ammunition and 10mm rounds, along with some frag grenades. Back in the middle of the Mason Square, we can find this kind of, like, wagon or train car that has some frag grenades, a lot of 5.56 rounds, and 3 Chinese assault rifles. So a pretty darn good find. Again, if you want to repair some of those rifles, you can use one for yourself. Now you have a lot of ammunition, and you can also sell a few later in the game. Back inside Hubris Comics, above the rigged terminal, we can find a copy of Tales of a Jerktown Junkie Vendor. Then over along this bookshelf, we can find a pre-war book, so pretty darn good. And if we go over to this door and kind of go down this staircase here, we can find the other entrance to the Hubris Comics utility tunnels. Like I said, there's 2 entrances into the Hubris Comics. Now, heading back to the western part of Hubris Comics, eventually you'll find this long hallway where if you go down it, you will be pelted by tons of baseballs. You have these baseball pitching machines that just hurtle like a dozen or so baseballs at you. It's kind of crazy. Anyways, we'll find an elevator to the printing room of Hubris Comics, and in here we will find a firefight taking place between, well, ghouls and Mad Johnny Wes, who's just kind of a crazy survivor in the post-apocalypse, who has taken refuge in this facility and is using 2 Mark V turrets to help him kill these ghouls and to help him try to kill you. I highly recommend using a long-range rifle, like I'm using the Victory rifle here, a sniper rifle, in order to kill him. It made it a lot easier, and then taking out his turrets after that. Now, there is a terminal in his, back room there that says it's a turret control terminal. However, it does not have any impact on the turrets in the room. Now, if we come over to the center area of the printing room, we can find the printing terminal, where we can turn on the printing press. However, upon turning it on, the machine just completely breaks down. Now, a fun fact, if you ever visit Our Lady of Hope Hospital, a terminal entry there mentions that a certain employee here, Richard Maynard Watson, got hurt because of one of the printing press machines malfunctioning, spraying hot steam and caustic chemicals into his face and hands, thereby causing severe burns and even nerve damage, putting him in the hospital. However, the steam coming from the machines now seemed to have no effect on the player character, despite the fact that apparently this gas is poisonous. Now, back upstairs, if we make our way to the eastern part of the second floor, we can find a staircase that takes us downstairs. If you look off in the distance, you will see 2 ghouls running towards pitching machines, and the ghouls were just getting absolutely wrecked by those pitching machines, which I think is pretty freaking funny. We can find this kind of small cubicle, and in here we can find a bookshelf that has a pre-war book on it. And then there's also a first aid kit with some healing items and another first aid box with a bobby pin and some more healing items. We can also find another publishing control terminal that will unlock the door leading to Mad Johnny Wes. And this ghoul here was just Slav squatting in front of the door for whatever reason. I don't really know what he was trying to do there. Anyways, in the room we can find a Nuka-Cola Quantum on this desk, along with some darts, and then next to it we can find a copy of Grognak the Barbarian. There is the worthless turret control terminal that I mentioned earlier, and then we will loot Johnny's body for some good loot, like a minigun, some ammunition, and also there is a lot of ammunition boxes here, filled with a lot of ammunition. So all in all, I have to say, as far as Hubris Comics, there's a ton of ammunition. Now, also throughout the facility, we can find these posters of the various comic series and characters owned by Hubris Comics, like Captain Cosmos and Jango the Monkey. Now, before ending the video, there is one terminal entry of note that I think is kind of funny, and it is important to the story. If we go to the entrance and we click on the letters to the editor entry, it reads, Requiem for an Antagonist. Grognak the Barbarian is an excellent comic for many reasons, but one of the most widely respected ones is the depth of its villains, from the cold-blooded manipulations of the man Saurian to the love-hate romance with Fim Ra. The stories of Grognak's enemies are every bit as fascinating as his own tales. But for my money, no tale is more tragic and more fascinating than that of the AntAgonizer. While never developed as fully as major villains like Skullpocalypse or Master Donald, the portrait of the orphan girl raised by ants and instilled with a bitter hatred of humanity has tremendous potential for reader connection and possible redemption. However, in Grognak and the Ants of Agony, Mr. Neptura threw away all of that, potentially by simply treating the Antagonizer as a two-dimensional villain with a futile and pointless grudge against mankind. His writing replaced her subtle undertones of lost humanity and tragically lost innocent with the worst sort of mustache-twirling, cliched dialogue. It was an offense to a deep and tragic character. How a hack like that continues to find work in comics is beyond my comprehension. Hubris Comics should fire him and return the series to the capable hands of Mr. Morales. Until that time, I refuse to buy another comic from what used to be my favorite publisher, Obsessed in Oakmont. So as we can see, Obsessed in Oakmont, well, was not happy with the result of the AntAgonizer. But of course, if you've played Fallout 3 before, you know that the AntAgonizer is an actual character within Fallout 3. However, that is a story for another day. But within Hubris Comics, we can get an idea of the origin for the AntAgonizer. And there you guys have it, Hubris Comics from Fallout 3. Perhaps one of my, low-key, kind of more underrated locations within Fallout 3, just because it's a really cool place to visit, and its connection to Wilhelm's Wharf is just really kind of awkward, but funny, at least to me. And we can also find a ton of skill books within to upgrade our skills. And also the character here, Mad Johnny Wes, is just kind of an interesting villain that has gone crazy. Kind of feel bad for him, but hey, not much else we can do. Alright guys, what do you guys think of Hubris Comics from Fallout 3? Do you guys ever go here? What do you guys think of the utility tunnels? Is it a little bit awkward, or am I just crazy? Let me know in the comments below. If you guys have any recommendations or ideas for future locations, future videos, please post them in the comments section below. I always enjoy reading your guys' comments and what you guys have to say. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, until next time.